It's not so much the overall war effort, although there is that. These have become the heroes of the counteroffensive, which has been going on in the southern sector of the front. This huge push by Ukraine, which began in June, which intended to cut the Russian armies of the south in half and isolate Crimea, which was supposed to be a real game changer. But unfortunately, due to the huge belts of Russian minefields, which have actually extended to like 3 or 4 times their regular depth, a lot of the Ukrainian advanced units, armored units, tanks and APCs, armored personnel carriers, have got tangled up in these minefields. The whole schedule's been thrown out of sync. Everything's moving very slowly. A lot of destruction of armored vehicles. And so the sappers, guys, actually combat engineers who go in and demine these minefields in order to let vehicles through, have not only become the sort of, heroes of the battle, as it were, and they are real heroes. I mean, they're operating under the most extreme stress, trying to clear minefields during combat. I mean, it's not like they're doing it in a benign environment, but also the whole pace of it has slowed down to a point that really this counteroffensive now is being led by the pace of how far guys can walk on their feet with mine clearing valens in front of the mine detectors. These are handheld devices, probes clearing mines before armor can get through to the next minefield. So they're not just brave guys, but it's actually their work is is what is slowing down the whole offensive, because without them it can't go any faster. Vehicles are just lost in minefields.
And what are they like to speak to? Are they? There's a great quote from someone who works with them saying they're crazy. They're so brave. They just sort of plow forward when the bombs are bursting all around them to try and clear the ground. What type of characters did you meet?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, often units from different units in the same army will kind of criticize each other and slag each other off a bit, but no one does that with the sappers. The armored troops, the infantry carried in the back of the armored vehicles, are all like, yeah, we love the sappers. But they are very much combat engineers. So the ones I met were usually older guys. I don't know why that was, but may I add that all the ones I met are mobilized. So, a few months ago, they were the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the guy in the bar. They were older guys. There are a few young ones among them. They were pretty cool guys. They spoke quite openly about how to deal with stress and fear, and how they found it a little bit easier to deal with when they're actually doing the job, even in the middle of combat, rather than afterwards when they rested between these missions. At the particular team I spoke to in a farmhouse, where the kind of fears played a bit more on their minds, they said it was far better to express fears within the team I had access to and spent time with. They talked about it quite a bit. And one young guy who had been blown up 3 times by shellfire, trying to defuse mines, hospitalized each time. That's quite a common experience. Um, he said, the thing I can't get my head around as a young man is that I really believe in my work. I believe in my job. And I understand that a kind of ultimate victory depends on my work. I have to accept I might not survive this.
And he was able to make peace with it. Should this have been expected, Anthony? That we talk a lot about the counteroffensive and how it's gone. We knew the Russians were mining. We knew they were booby trapping everywhere they went. We knew that from the very beginning of the conflict. Was the counteroffensive sufficiently cognizant of that fact when it was planned, do you feel?
The counteroffensive has had a huge amount of problems, many of them political problems and problems related to its timing. So, first of all, the Russians started building their defense lines really last summer, last August, and the Russians are, great at building defense lines. Get away from the Russians are useless, the Russians are stupid, the Russians are inept. The Russian army is great at building defensive positions. They dig in, they know how to dig in really well, and they plant mines, and they do that immediately. So what they've had time to build this Surovikin line, which is essentially 3 different layers of defences, each one an independent line, but mutually supporting with artillery fire and all the rest of it. Most divided by 3 layers of minefields as well: anti-tank mines, anti-personnel mines, and again another one of anti-tank mines at a depth, as I say, 3 or 4 times the normal conventional doctrinal depth of Russian minefields. So this should have all been anticipated. However, you've then got the thing, well, to go through those, the Ukrainians need a lot of time, a lot of the right equipment, mine clearing equipment, and a huge amount of training to conduct this combined arms offensive, by which I mean using all sorts of different units: mechanized, sappers, artillery, infantry, comms units, all the rest of it. Ukraine didn't really have that time. There was a lot of internal pressure and some external pressure for them to get on with the counteroffensive. Also, the longer they waited, the more the Russians were going to dig in. So there was that too. So things got off probably sooner than they should have done. Everyone said the offensive should have started in spring. The Ukrainians clearly weren't ready in spring. They probably weren't that ready really in the summer, but they started. And this is where we are. But it's very unlikely, despite some of the voices that are a bit enthusiastic on this, that this counteroffensive will achieve a major breakthrough to the extent it was desired and cut the Russian army in the south in half and isolate Crimea by the autumn. It's very unlikely now that that's going to happen.
Yeah, gloomy news. It's your birthday today, Anthony, I see from the Times.
Ah!
Happy birthday to
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much for everything you do for us. You
Got
know,
me there.
we're so good. Did you expect to be your 57th birthday in a land war in Europe? I mean, it's kind of extraordinary.
Most of my birthdays are spent in weird places. Usually used to be a day I used to go back to boarding school, so I don't think it's better than that, right?
That's a very stoical attitude, Anthony. I expect no less from you. Good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
That's
Bye-bye.
Anthony Lloyd there. 57 today. Doesn't look a day over 56. He's the Times' senior foreign correspondent from the Donbass there, talking to us about the sappers he's met on that Ukrainian counteroffensive.